Hello, my name is Cen Wan from Birkbeck, University of London. I'm very happy to introduce my recent research on human aging genes and the phenotypic abnormalities by using the hierarchical feature selection methods. So the reason why we're interested in this direction is due to the fact that aging is well known as one of the major factors for several diseases, for example, the cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and the Parkinson's disease. And there are also many human genetic mutations that also lead to the human phenotype abnormalities that also decrease the lifespan of the human being. So we already find out that some genes they play the roles on aging process. Also, the mutations of those genes will lead to the human phenotypic abnormalities. That's why it's quite interesting to figure out what's the reason behind what is the link between the aging process and human phenotypic abnormalities after certain genes have mutations. So in order to review these links, we need to use the database, and that includes deposit the human aging related genes, and we're going to use the human phenotype ontology database, which actually use the generalized vocabulary to describe the human phenotypic abnormalities. So based on our research, we try to find the general methods that can be used to make predictions on the human aging related genes. And also we try to build out the framework that can be used to predict this, the human phenotypic abnormalities happens based on certain events of the genetic mutations. And then also we try to discover some novel patterns between the human aging and the human phenotypic abnormalities, because that will help us to better understand the aging process and also the effects of the human genetic mutations. So one of the very important the point for this work is using the hierarchical feature selection methods. So basically, it actually was proposed to cope with a very special type of data set where all the features, they are structures by using a generalization to specialization relationship. So we call the hierarchical relationships. For example, if you look at the figure on the left-hand side, this is example human phenotype ontology dark. So a directly acyclic graph, and you can see that the term on the top that have a most generic definitions of the phenotype abnormality, and the term on the bottom, it actually encodes the most specific definitions of the phenotype abnormality. So that's why we call these, they have a generalization to specialization relationship or parent to child relationships. So in order to make further discussions, we use those different random letters to denote individual terms, as you can see in the figure on the right hand side. Okay, so those actually different terms of different features, they are connected by the generalizations to specialization relationship. According to that relationship, we can further create a very sparse matrix. So as you can see, this matrix shows that for each row, we actually denote the individual instance. For example, in this case, each instance denote each gene, and different columns means the different features. That also means different attribute terms. So when we create this matrix, we need to use the backpropagation methods to backpropagate all these annotations for individual terms and individual genes. Okay. For example, if you look at the gene 1, so for term C, and the values of term C equals to 1, which means that term C is annotated with gene 1. And then we backpropagate according to the hierarchy. So all the ancestors of term C will have the value equals to 1. For example, if you look at the value of term I, F, M, L, Q, and O, they all have value equals to 1 because of this hierarchical relationship. So one of the challenge for this work is that this kind of sparse matrix is very special because it encodes this hierarchical dependency information between different terms. So the normal or standard, we call the flat methods, they can handle this problem quite well. That's why people has been working on this direction for a while, as you can see. So at least 10 articles which has been proposed over the last 10 years to focus on these directions. So the people propose the different specific type of machine learning methods that exploit this hierarchical dependency information for different machine learning tasks. For example, for the group lasso, and also Bayesian graphical models, and also the hierarchical feature selection methods. So that is one group of methods that we're gonna discuss today. So so today I'm gonna introduce a new method. Basically, that is a variant of the one of the method we proposed before. It is called selecting the positive hierarchical information preserving features. We call the heap plus. So it's based on the previous method we proposed and called the heap. So basically, heap only select the terms they actually preserve the most important information for the hierarchy. For example, if you look at the term C, so again, its value equals to 1. So which means that we only keep term C after doing this feature selection. The reason is if we know the value of the term C equals to 1, then we already know the values of all 10 C's ancestor terms. Okay, as you can see for the figure in the middle, for example, the term I, F, M, Q, O, they have they actually has been removed after doing the feature selection because they all have the same value as term C. Okay, which means that there's no need for us to store those ancestor terms information. We just need to keep the information for term C, and then we know all the value for its ancestors. And then vice versa, if you look at the case when the term's value equals to 0, for example, if we look at term M, then we can remove all its descendants terms information. Okay, for example, term P and R, the both terms are descendant of the term N. So if we know the value of term N equals to 0, then we already know the value of P and R, they all equal to 0. Okay, so there's no need to store this redundant information. This is the principle of the heap method. And the new method we propose here, just a variant of heap. So actually we focus on the knowledge discovery. So we don't actually need to use all these terms for the downstream supervised learning tasks. That means that we don't need to store the terms they have value equals to 0, because that's not actually informative in terms of the knowledge discovery. So more importantly, or more interesting, will be those terms they have value equals to 1. Then we can try to make some biological interpretations based on those terms after doing this feature selection by using the heap plus method. And the reason why we propose heap plus is due to the fact that in our works, in this work, we only have the human aging-related genes, but we don't know the labels of those human aging-related genes. Okay, which means that we can't use the supervised learning-based feature selection methods. So, heap plus is one of the unsupervised learning-based methods. It's actually give you a very easy way to handle the case when you don't know about the prior knowledge for the label information. And another very important point is that the heap plus method is based on the lazy learning, which means that you need to do this hierarchical feature selection for each individual instance one by one. So the reason why we're doing that is because this type of hierarchical dependency or this redundancy information only appears on this the lazy learning paradigm that is only appear for individual instance. In this case, that means I will need to do this hierarchical feature selection for individual genes. And another benefit of using HIP plus is it's very computationally efficient. So you can actually use the HIP plus on very large ontology database, for example, like a gene ontology. So it's quite easy to be scaled to the very large ontology. And also, according to another research, we have used the HIP plus methods to make the predictions on COVID-related proteins, and it shows that the terms selected by HIP plus will lead to higher correlation with the protein sequence similarity. Okay, this is a pseudocode of this HIP plus methods. It's quite simple, actually. If you look at the pseudocode from line 1 to line 6, so it starts by initializing the values of the different variables, and of course you need to actually also initialize the set of ancestor for individual features, also the ancestor of the set of the descendants for individual features, and assign the selection status value equals to available. And then from line 7 to line 27, so it conducts this hierarchical feature selection. So basically, it's gonna check the values of the terms. So if the value of terms equals to 1, then it will run the pseudocode from line 9 to line from line 10 to line 12. Basically, so if we have the values of a term equals to 1, then it actually will remove all these ancestor terms from this original feature set by assigning the values of the selection status equals to remove. And vice versa, if the value of the terms equals 0, then you're going to remove all these descendant terms for that target term. And one more step you need to do is that you need to actually remove that terms has been processed if the value of that term equals to 0, because we don't actually want to keep the terms they have a value equal to 0 for the downstream knowledge discovery process. So after processing all individual terms in the original feature set, and then we just need to keep all these features they have value not equals to remove, and then we actually consider those features are most informative features that we like to use for the downstream knowledge discovery task. Okay, so and then we talk about some interpretations of the HPL terms selected by hierarchical feature selections. So basically, as you can see on the table, so on the left-hand side, so it shows the 5 most important HIP terms selected by the HIP plus method. So they are relevant with the developmental abnormalities, related disease, and it shows a very strong link with aging. So as we already know that, for example, the ATR genes play very important roles on controlling the degrees of the DNA damage, and the DNA damage is a very important factors for the aging process as well. So then we can see that there's a strong link between those mechanisms of the different pathways that are relevant with the DNA damage. However, according to our actually literature review, for those directions of research, we didn't find many research so far based on this hypothesis or these directions. So we plan to work with the aging biologists, and they might be able to further investigate this direction or hypothesis by doing some experimental work to show that maybe other genes or pathway they can be found to be relevant with the DNA damage and all relevant genes or proteins. Okay, so in conclusion, so in this work we use HP hierarchical feature selections to select some terms that can be used for the downstream knowledge discovery part to try to figure out the link between human aging and developmental abnormalities, often one type of the phenotypic abnormalities. And then, of course, we can try to propose more methods that can be used for this task. And also, our recent research has been focused on developing more hierarchical dependency based probability graphical models, then try to figure out some latent patterns between different terms. For example, if you look at the Bayesian networks, it can learn this connection between terms that has not been shown in our original ontology before, and then hopefully we can use this method to actually discover some latent or novel pattern or novel dependency between the terms. So here I just show 3 work we have done so far over the last couple of years, and this ongoing research directions for us. And finally, I would like to thank the Birkbeck School of Research grant, also the Professor Alex Freitas. We actually work very closely over the last couple of years for this direction. So, and finally, thanks for your attention.